Go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are in the middle of chapter 8. Last week, we were talking about partaking in things that are permissible and staying away from things that are forbidden and how that affects the goof, the body. And we talked about an interesting concept, which is akin to, I guess I would call it purgatory, and that's what the English translators are calling it, purgatory of the grave. So there's an element of residual uncleanliness that resides in or on the body. Excuse me, I don't know the details, I forget. But if a Yisrael partakes of something that is permissible, but he doesn't have the right kavana, and then he does teshuva, and it says that there's still like a little residual element of impurity there, and how the grave can clean that over time. And we've got into a lot of different details. So watch the previous class, if you're last two classes, I would say. And we are in, oh yeah, I forgot. We're in lessons in Tanya, part 1, chapter 8 of Likutei Amarim. We shall now learn what is necessary for the rectification of permitted words, not spoken for the sake of heaven. So we were talking about things that were permitted, like foods. Now we're going to be talking about permitted words. As for innocent idle chatter, such as in the case of an ignoramus who cannot study, the words for ignoramus, or a common term, is am haaretz. That might be I think we already have that word. Oh no, I don't want to do a new presentation. Just a new chapter. So that is a common term that's used. It says ignorant person or a common person. Literally, though, person of the land.
Maybe we can say salt of the earth.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I've heard that term before for common person.
Kind of like the virtuous common person, though. You know, he's the salt of the earth. He's a good.
Oh, Russell, I think you cut out or something, bud.
Okay, yeah, I was saying he's kind of like the salt of the earth. He's kind of like, you know, humble, good person, you know, like a common person, but with a certain, you know, attributes about him.
Oh, now I do know. I remember back years ago, people would talk about that in relationship with certain texts in Christianity or whatever, and that was always something that I was like, I don't. What do you mean by that? And nobody could tell me what it was. Is there an actual like Torah source for something called salt of the earth? Because from what I remember, it was salted. You salted the earth when you were conquering it, and you didn't want it to grow anything. Does
I don't know. It seemed like I just always heard it just in common.
Oh, just like colloquialism.
Yeah. That's all I've ever heard it in.
Oh, I got you.
I just figured it was a Texasism.
Oh, I got you. Hey,
like bless your heart. And a few other things.
Oh yeah, he's
just
salt of the earth type thing. I got
yeah, like an idiom, just a simple idiom.
I got you.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Somebody who's like has good integrity, is a happy person, is very helpful, and helps others in the community. They don't think of themselves first. They're always thinking of others. You know, they're good people. But yet they're very humble. They don't have a lot of money.
Mm.
You know, they know how to live off the earth. They're very self-sufficient. So
Right.
yeah.
I think I hate to say it, but I have a feeling this is a little bit more of a negative connotation. Like an ignoramus, probably ignoramus in our vernacular is very harsh. You calling somebody ignoramus, but it's somebody that's just not ignorant. They're not necessarily
I think
of low aptitude, but they are just like, sometimes I say I'm ignorant on that topic. Go ahead, Norman.
no, I was just going to say that in Tanakh, I think the way I've seen it used is basically just uneducated people of the land that are uneducated.
There you go.
It's kind of like Akiva was before he started learning. He was just a shepherd, and he was he was an ignoramus, but he had the potential to learn given the opportunity, incredibly, but he didn't have the opportunity. And that's that's the way I always look at it. They're just someone who hasn't learned because of whatever situation that they're in. Maybe
Very good, yeah.
they had to go quit school and pick cotton. That's the way it was.
Very good.
Support your family.
Now this says an ignoramus who cannot study. So it's almost like there's no potential. No, who cannot. I don't know what he means by who cannot. Either he's incapable or he's capable. He just doesn't have the facilitation. He who is able to study is constantly obligated to fulfill the commandment of studying Torah. For him, idle chatter is prohibited. For the ignoramus, however, idle chatter may be permissible.
And I got on that one.
Yeah. He must have his soul cleansed from the impurity of this klipa through its being rolled into the hollow of a sling. See First Shmuel on 25:29. He shall sling out the souls of your enemies as out of the hollow of a sling. He must have his soul cleansed from the impurity of klipa, this klipa. So it's a klipa. Through it's being rolled in the hollow of a sling, as is stated in the Zohar, Parsha Beshalach. Okay. This punishment is described as being slung from one end of the world to the other, or from Yisrael to other lands. Wow. Talmud Bavli Shabbat 152b. That's a big Masechet. That's a big tractate. The meaning of this is that the soul is flung from one extreme to the other. First, it is shown the truth and preciousness of holiness, and then it is slung into and reminded of the thoughts and words it experienced while in the physical world, a most painful experience for the soul. Whenever one goes about his affairs, protects one from this punishment in addition to its intrinsic value. Oh, that reciting from memory words of Torah. Whenever one goes about his affairs, protects one from this punishment in addition to its intrinsic value as Torah study and its efficacy in purifying the atmosphere. That makes sense. Reciting from memory words of Torah. So that helps protect you from idle chatter, from the klipa of idle chatter. And it's not just as for innocent idle chatter, such as in the case of an ignoramus who cannot study. Okay, so you could even have somebody who knows Torah, but they're engaging in idle chatter. So, wow, okay. But with regards to forbidden speech, such as scoffing and slander and the like, okay, so what would be permissible speech? It would just be talking about like whatever, the weather bunch or whatever. But with regard to forbidden speech, such as scoffing and slander and the like, which being prohibited stem from the three completely unclean klipot. Okay, so so you're talking about the weather, but oh yeah, it's really nice weather. Let's do a mitzvah. Maybe that would be like rectifying your speech that's permissible. Maybe that's coming from the klipat noga, let's say, even though it doesn't say it, it just says klipa. But it's permissible. Things that are permissible, I believe, are emanate from the noga. It has an element of possibility, of holy possibility, of potentiality. But things that are forbidden do not. It's very interesting.
So therefore, speech has to be very cautious, even in legal cases.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Right, because you could start incriminating yourself. But with regard to forbidden speech, such as scoffing and slander and the like, which being prohibited stem from the three completely unclean klipot. Klipot, hatameot, lagamre. Gimel, klipot. It's my Hebrew. Doesn't say three, does it? Is my Hebrew off? That's three. All right. The hollow of a sling alone does not suffice to cleanse and remove the impurity of the soul. Alone. But the soul must descend into Gehenna. They're translating this as purgatory, which is a greater punishment and thus more effective in cleansing the soul. So too, with one who is able to engage in the study of Torah, but occupies himself instead with idle chatter. So you have the ability to. So too, with one who is able to engage in study of Torah, oisek, la osok betorah, veosek bedivrim, but engage, occupied, but it involves. It's not just it's more than just occupies. It's it's oisek here. So you are engaging, you are fully engaged in Torah, or you are like fully engaging in this idle chatter. Go ahead, Dixie.
In this, Tanya, it's with regard to permissible idle chatter and thoughts, such as in the case of an ignoramus who is incapable of studying Torah. The Jew is commanded to devote every available moment to Torah study, and failing to do so is a grave sin. It would therefore follow that engaging in idle chatter and talk that serves no purpose will always constitute a transgression. Here, however, the author of the Tanya wants to cite an example of talk that is klipot noga, mundane but permissible. He cites the example of a Jew who is unable to study Torah, perhaps due to lack of literacy or intellectual ability. His idle chatter is not a sin because it does not take the place of Torah study, but rather it is directed toward a holy purpose. I thought that was interesting.
So it is from klipat noga. Permissible speech is from klipat noga. It's got an element of potentiality. Interesting. And I feel like it talked about something else that I didn't quite fully comprehend. And that's about the Torah, the person who has the ability to study Torah but doesn't, who oisek in the Torah but doesn't, and then the Am Haaretz who might not have the books, who might not be able to for some reason, right? There isn't.
It says due to a lack of literacy or intellectual ability, his idle chatter is not a sin because
It's
he
not a sin. Interesting.
breaks Torah, but rather it is directed toward. That is interesting because I never took it as that way. I thought all it was sin.
Right. I would, yes, what I thought too, Dixie. That's a good point. Here's what got me thinking about that earlier. I paused when I was gonna, and I almost said something, but I didn't. But I think I'm gonna bring it up now. For a non-Jew, is it permissible to eat a hazir, a pig, right? Hazir.
There, yeah.
Yeah. Is it permissible? So in regards to this, it's saying this is in regards to Yisrael. If this can apply to, or maybe it is Hadam, I don't know. I don't know if he actually specifically stated it. But let's just state something theoretically here. Like, help me out, because we'll go down like a little thought exercise or whatever. The Alter Rebbe saying what's permissible is the level of klipat noga. For a Yisrael, it's forbidden to eat a pig. So that would be from the 3 impure klipot, because it's forbidden. It's from the 3 completely impure klipot. However, for a non-Yisrael, is it permissible? That would be my first question. And 2, because it is permissible, and with the way the Alter Rebbe is talking, things that are permissible are derived from klipat noga, they can be elevated, then I would think, following that logic, and I'm not saying this is true, but let's just follow like a thread of logic here. Then a non-Jew could elevate a hazir, a pig meat, but the Yisrael could not. 3, the problem with that, there's a concept of non-Jews cannot be holier than Jews. In other words, how would it be that we could elevate a pig and they could not? And there's another concept, and I forget where it came from. And I think it revolves around Aver Min Ha, the limb of a living animal. And maybe, is it? Chicken eggs. For B'nai Noach, it would be Aver Min Ha to eat a chicken egg. But for Yisrael, it's permissible. And we don't abstain from something that is permitted to Yisrael, because that would make us more holy. So we can eat eggs. And I forget what tractate this is mentioned in. What is the one that regarding how to shecht meat? Starts with a B. I forget. Say that again.
No, I don't think it was what she said.
But do you guys understand what I'm saying about pig meat? If it's permissible, then non-Jews would be able to elevate it, because
I've heard it. I've heard that talk, James, and had discussions on it.
Really?
But see, the setting is that everything is permissible is not always profitable. So even though it would be permissible to do so,
right.
what profit would it bring?
Right.
And you know, and I'll put it to you like this, because I've asked these questions many years ago, if that was what we were to do, and I was steered away from it. But then this whole line of thought that you're bringing up, to me, brings up the idea of the nevela. Here is a kosher animal that died on its own, that the holy essence, the sparks within it, are lost because it's not being eaten, it's not having a bruchas over it, it's not like that. Now, if the righteous in the gates, so to speak, Deuteronomy 14:21. You get the meat given to them, and they say a bracha over it, and is the sparks elevated there? I always thought it was the bracha that made the sparks elevate. That's the way I understood it. I may not be correct.
It could be. Here's like a fourth thing, and I'm going to say this. I want to make it clear that this is a completely like it's not actually my view. I'm saying this as a potential question that we need to ask. Or could it be the fact that we are so like far down, so to speak, that we can eat pig and elevate pig because that we're going to use that energy to get us to where we need to go. In other words, it gets us to Yisrael. There's in other words, and when it comes to Yisrael being in wars, if they're in a war and the only thing that the warriors can eat and the Yisrael warriors can eat, it is permissible for them to eat pig. And it said this in Hilchot Malachim.
Is that because of Pikuah Nefesh? I mean,
It could be.
Yeah, if they were starving, if they were in war, they were in an area that all they had was pig,
Right.
and they were starving because the Torah always going to choose life.
Yeah.
And rather than starve to death, they get to eat the pig. But like Vindel used to teach, just don't suck the bones.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I agree with Norman, but like it also helps prove that other point that I had, which is if that's all you have to sustain, then does it actually become a mitzvah? Oh, maybe not a mitzvah, but it becomes permissible, like you're supposed to. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'm wondering if that's a similar aspect for non-Jews in regards to certain foods like pig. I use pig specifically for that.
Right. But
yeah. So I'm trying to because I was like, what is the Alter Rebbe going to say about non-Jews in this case? Because clearly we have a lot more things that are permissible, but is there holiness in the actual thing, or is it somehow that we as non-Jews are? And again, I'm spitballing again here. But this is how my mind works. Are non-Jews able to rectify or release sparks of holiness that are in that Gimel Tameo Klipot, the three completely impure husks? In other words, are we able to break through those husks so much because we're already dirty or some such that we're able to go in there and release those sparks, so to speak? Like for instance, I think non-Jews can completely demolish an idol, but Jews, Yisrael, have to bury it or some such. Have you ever heard that? I think it's in the laws for Avodah Zarah, for Lo Avodah Zarah. And so do you see what I'm saying? There's something going on here that I don't think it'll probably be in the Tanya because this is a book primarily for Yisrael. But that is I have a very genuine desire to know more about that. Dixie, you had your hand up.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Oh, you said okay. That's okay.
Okay, I have a question.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, Ernest.
Does anybody know when Hashem gave Noah the seventh law that it's okay to eat meat? Was there any did he say the meat has to be kosher, or was the kosher commandment given on Mount Sinai only to the Jews?
he knew what the kosher animals were
Because he
was familiar with it, and he offered them, and that's why he was given 7 pairs of each of the clean animals to take onto the ark with him. But he didn't. But in the commandment to eat, you can eat any animal.
Okay.
but he ate, he slaughtered the clean animals, and he knew of that pre-Sinai uh, commandment of which animals were clean and which animals weren't clean. And
Yeah.
obviously he had, because why why do I have to take 7 pairs of these and only 1 pair of these? Because
Yeah.
those were going to be used for the sacrificial system.
Okay.
I've never seen anything where it's talking about kosher, non-kosher in regards to the Sheva mitzvahs b'nai Noach.
Yeah.
Only in regards to Abraham Hahai, which seems, if I remember, we kind of did a deep study on this like years ago, which
Okay.
is it seems attached actually, like if you get into the actual laws and the Indian of it, it appears to
Yeah.
be connected with blood, actually abstaining from blood.
Okay.
But my theory on that is because B'nai Noach are more external, going from the external into Torah, and
Okay.
Yisrael is more from the Panemius out. That
Okay.
we see, I shouldn't say we, I'm talking about a generality, but B'nai Noach, like non-Jews,
Yeah.
we see from the external. So when we see a limb ripped off of an animal, we think that's its actual life.
Okay.
And so we have to make sure, it's said that when before we eat it, we have to make sure the animal is actually dead. For a
Okay.
Yisrael, when they do it, when they shecht an animal and it is a kosher shecht, even
Yeah.
though the animal is still moving, as long as it was kosher shecht, is that as if the animal is actually dead, and a Yisrael can eat it, even though the animal is still moving.
Oh, okay. Thank
I
you.
mean, everything
Appreciate it.
everything else has to be kosher about it. Don't get me wrong. But
Okay.
for a Ben Noach, that would be forbidden. For a Yisrael, because he knows the intricate laws and everything, it's it's
Okay.
permissible. So my point is, it has something to do, I believe, with abstaining from the life, which is in
Okay.
blood. The abstaining from the soul, basically, of that animal. Non-Jews, we see. I say it we, but I don't think that applies so much to those who are studying here. But
Okay.
when we're in that the Helam, that concealment of the Ha'olam, the world, we see things external, and then we try and probe the depths. So when we see the exterior of an animal being ripped, that is different than the internal panemius of a Yisrael doing the shecht, because they have the wisdom, the internal panemiut, the inside internals of the wisdom of Hashem through the Torah. If that makes any sense, I don't even know.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm trying my best, Ernestine. I'm like,
I appreciate you.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
A for effort, James.
James?
But yeah, go ahead, Mercy.
Would the tractate that you were talking about be on Beta? Because you were talking about eggs, and that's Beta.
Oh no, not Hulin.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. You refreshed my memory. So thank you. I think it's in
okay.
Hulin.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. But you could be right too. I thought it was in Hulin, but yeah. So if you ever get asked by a rabbi, like, well, you can't eat eggs, because if you tell them, like, I keep the Sheva mitzvahs, and they say it's forbidden to eat eggs, it's Aver Min Hahai. And then what you would reply with, you would say, well, it's taught in the Talmud that non-Jews shouldn't be holier than non-Jews, and whatever's permitted for Yisrael is permitted for B'nai Noach. And we learned that from this law about eggs, how it's permitted for Yisrael to eat eggs. Again, I think it has something to do with, we see things, I forget the opposite of panemius. Do you remember, Norman?
The opposite of panemius?
Yeah, panemius, and there's I forget the Hebrew term. It's not used often, so
Yeah, no.
okay.
I mean, everybody's familiar with the concept that we can't eat an egg that has a blood spot in it, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what I think comes from the soul thing. It's all revolves around the blood.
Right.
Um, so what I talked about, like when it comes to shechting an animal and Abraham High, and now the eggs.
That's the way I understand it. You know, the soul is in the blood, the life force is in the blood, the nefesh is in the blood.
Yeah.
And if you work off the premise you are what you eat,
Yeah.
then you're eating the essence of the animal, and that's the idea of eating blood. The limb of a living animal is that blood in the limb. If its life force is still in it, and you ate it, that's the way I understood it, that mitzvah being taught.
And still attached to the living animal.
Yeah, you still have the life force of that animal. You're eating the life force of that animal, and you take on that animal nature, that animal characteristics, and that's what we're trying to move away from.
Right. Very good. Wow. I hope everybody's engaged.
James.
Yeah.
What does panemius mean?
Panemiut, the inner internalities. There's externalities and there's internalities, and for some reason I forget the externalities. It's not talked. The externalities is not talked too much about. It's the internality, the panemiut. So when Yisrael is injected, so Norman, I'm going to use it as an example. Hope that's okay.
Sure.
So God willing, he had his bris meal on the 8th day. That's when he's panemiut with the Torah. It's beginning. His parents loved him so much that they enveloped him and literally like injected him with Torah, even though it was against his will. Like, I shouldn't say that. Who knows what it was? But, it's like they're doing it. They're imposing the Torah on him. And that doesn't happen to non-Jews, really. Like, we're not forced into the Torah. We're out in the world. We see the externalities first. Norman and the rest of Yisrael, they see the internalities of it, starting on their interaction with Torah and mitzvahs. So when Norman does, and it's my theory as well, non-Jews, but when Norman is involved in Oisek, in Torah, and when he does mitzvahs, he is bringing in, or has brought in, that nefesh elokis, that godly soul, which is an essence of Hashem. It's the panemiut of it's the essence of Hashem, and therefore it gets basically injected into Yisrael's inner essence. It's the panemius. So juxtapose that with non-Jews who do not intrinsically start to interact with Torah and mitzvahs. It's usually something external for us. Nobody's really impressing it on us. And so we deal with the Torah from the outside in. It's through our own merit that we inject the Torah somehow in us, through Torah study or what have you. So, and I think Torah study, one of the things I want to emphasize in our class is that Torah study, because I believe that's the beginning for non-Jews of interacting with that nefesh elokis. And I'm not, and the panemiut level. So when you are oisek in the Torah, you're bringing into your brain, and you are uniting with that nefesh elokis into your seichel, into your intellect. And when you're uniting with it, because it's your intellect now, you are engaging your mind to tell you, and you can now tell your nefesh behemoth, your animal soul, what to do.
That's good.
Yeah, so I'm going to do the 7. And that's how, from my perspective, how a ger toshav, or somebody who's at that level, that madrega, kug ger toshav, interacts with the 7. we're doing it now from the panemiut out. It's not just an externality of the world, like we're doing things for the sake of the world, to be nice to people and things like that. We're now doing it because the Torah says so, because Hashem says so, the essence of Hashem.
Okay.
And it's like a small version or a small way, not the breadth of a Yisrael. It's a very coarse, even though I believe it's in the panemiut of the non-Jew, it radiates out in a very coarse way throughout the nefesh behemoth of a non-Jew, in a very coarse way. Because the seven are they're kind of coarse. They're yeah, like
Okay, very
so
good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Using the word coarse, like meaning like superficial or
Unrefined.
unrefined. Okay.
So yeah, I see, this is how I see it, based on I think what's talked about in chapter 4. Yisrael has I deeply believe that every human being has 613 parts, just like the king. However, for the non-Jew, they are concealed. For the Jew, for the Yisrael, however, they have 613 parts that they are connected with through the mitzvahs. So a Yisrael who has accepted the mitzvahs, every single one of those 613 organs has like this conduit that is now revealed, and is directly a part of Hashem, but it's revealed to you. So the klipa is like removing or has been removed. So you're on the path as a Yisrael to see eye to eye, ein ba'ayin, and you're either removing the klipa or it has been removed. For the
I like eye to eye, but given who somebody asked about panemius,
yeah,
and the Hebrew word panemius shares the root with panim,
face,
which is face. And then it's, I believe it's in Devarim. I'm not sure what the parsha and pasuk is, but
with that mercy was talking about
face to face, panim el panim.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And so for me, when you were asking the question about what's the opposite, that's why I was like, what is that word? That has a lot to do with the face, the outer, external, except for if you're looking face to face with Hashem, now it becomes internal. So it's like, okay, what's the opposite? Well, what's the opposite of the outer internal? Now I'm like going, wait, that's very profound now. So
Yeah, there's something in the Garden of Eden that's talked about in terms of I'm not sure if it was Adam and Chava, like if they were like this, if they were like not face to face and then they turned face to face. But I mean, it's obviously a very mystical concept, but I think on a simple level, it's like here we are on Zoom, and we arguably could be somewhat face to face, but you know, the learning that we're doing face to face is very holy.
right, we're face to face, but we're really not face to face, but
Right.
it's like an internal face to face. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
very
yeah.
profound thing.
And that's why the words aren't exactly the same, but they share a similar root. So panemius is like James said, is the inner essence.
Mhm, mhm.
But have you ever heard someone say, I see their soul in their face
Or like in their eye or something.
or their eyes, their
Yeah.
face? Yeah.
Yes, yes. Their eyes are the gateway to their soul. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Nope, keep talking, Norman. We're listening.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
I came to a period.
Okay, alrighty. That's cool. No, I'm joking with you.
I don't.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. I appreciate you bringing that up, Norman. Because here's the deal, or not a deal, but here's the thing. Mercy brought that up. She goes, "What's the root word for panemius, for panemius, or face?" I forget what it was, but she was like, "Oh yeah, it's face," and so that's pretty cool. Very cool. Okay, The soul, there's the hollow of the sling, and it's like going back and forth. But it must receive the severe penalties which are meted out for neglect of the Torah in particular. Upon the bittul, the nullification. Apart from the general retribution for the neglect of positive commandments through indolence, never heard of that word before. Anybody know what indolence means? Indolence? Maybe that meant insolence. Namely, the purgatory of snow. So there's a purgatory of grave, and there's purgatory of snow, as is explained elsewhere.
Indolence, laziness.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Going after my phone.
Yeah, I was just too tired to look it up, and okay, that was a bad dad joke. Okay. Namely, the purgatory of snow. So this purgatory is the Gehenna, Gehinnom of Sheleg. So there's different types of Gehenna, as explained elsewhere. Interesting. The purgatory, Gehenna, where the soul is cleansed of the stains of sin so that may enter paradise to enjoy the radiance of God's glory, operates on the principle of measure for measure, i.e. punishment in kind. Thus, sins of commission caused by the heat of passion and lust are cleansed in a Gehenna, Nahar, like literally stream of fire, while sins of omission due to indolence and coolness, i.e. lack of fervor, are cleansed in a Gehenna of snow. Oh, that's interesting. Cures the soul of spiritual frostbite, which caused it to sin out of indolence. Oh yeah, it's like, you want to know what cold is? I'll show you cold. Right? Yeah.
It's James, this is a Steinsaltz says about it here. It says the assumption that a person who is able to study Torah and does nothing else instead acts out of laziness. The punishment for laziness is the Gehenna of snow.
Oh,
You
wow.
know?
So if all he wants to do is study Torah all day, is that what it said?
No, it's like if he can, but he doesn't.
Oh, he doesn't. He can study Torah all day. I got
He
you.
can study Torah all day, but he studies something else, and or he does something else. Then then that's talking about the laziness, which is the word that you mentioned, which is connected with the Gehenna stove. There are two types of Gehenna. One of fire, intense heat, and one of snow, intense cold. The having for having wanted too much, having done too much, and having pursued what one should not have pursued. The Gehenna of snow is the punishment for not possessing enough, for not having desired, not having done, not having pursued all of the mitzvot that one ought to have desired, done, and pursued.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, if you're so cold, you better get busy to get warm.
Yeah.
So keep moving. Keep moving, or you're going to be cold.
That's right.
Occupying oneself. Again, oisek. It's so funny. I learned pronunciation from like a Yemenite type of Hebrew, but then when I hear rabbis talk, it's usually an Ashkenazic pronunciation, so I like get all kerfuffled. Occupying oneself with the intellectual disciplines of the nations of the world, of the Umot HaOlam. No. The Chachmot, the wisdoms, maybe the philosophies, the knowledge of the Chokmah, basically the Chokmah of the peoples of the world. So don't confuse yourself. Don't occupying oneself with the Chokmah of the people of the world, the people of the concealment, is likewise included in the category of engaging in inconsequential matters insofar as the sin of neglecting a Torah study is concerned. That makes a lot of sense. For the study, in studying the intellectual disciplines of the nations, too, one is guilty of neglecting Torah study, as explained in the laws of Torah study. That makes a lot of sense. Like for me, I would read philosophy things, and they weren't getting anywhere. Like I was required to read the philosophy stuff in college, and they didn't realize like they were just studying logic, but they were trying to think. They were trying to think logic was an actual thing. It's not. It's just a function. And my computer science background, I guess, but you have a function. You got to plug stuff in. Well, you can't just mentally try and Kabbalah basically stuff out of nothing here on earth. It's got to be received somewhere. And so, yeah, the people, all these philosophies and things like this, like if you're not seeking from the externality of this world, from something other than this world, then you're just running in circles. It's just silly. And in order to, if you don't like the way the world is, you can't just be involved in this world, or you're going to just keep doing the same thing as the world does. You have to make a difference, you're going to have to be different. And
James, let me share with you what Steinsaltz says about this right here, which I find is very, very interesting. This is something I had a hard time sitting here trying to wrap my mind around, but it says, however, a person involves himself in philosophy, science, or any other secular pursuit that uses the intellectual powers of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, his spiritual investment is far deeper. This is not just external involvement, as when someone talks in a superfluous way, but involvement of all the highest facilities of the soul, to the extent that the soul is unified, as discussed in chapter 5, with its profane subject matter.
that makes sense. Oh my goodness, I am so miscavin to that the other day. I was like, there is oneness in things that people do that are not for, that's what he's talking about right there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and because it goes on, and he gives this there is he says basically that Klippa Noga contains no inner aspect of holiness. It's not bad, it's not evil, it just doesn't have an inner aspect of holiness. So it's this, so when you're talking about science, and you can talk about science or philosophy or all of these different things is what he's going on to talk about. You are basically, it says, with you're operating within this Klippa Noga.
Yeah, very good. That's an excellent way to put it, Russell. Yeah. You're not putting it anywhere. You're just going like around in circles in that thing.
Yeah, it's
excellent. That's excellent. That's very profound. I appreciate that. That's very good. Wow. Oh, wow. This is a big deal right here. So this class is for non-Jews, and this hat, we see that a lot. Um, hmm. I don't know if we read this all. Oh, it's likewise included in the category of engaging in inconsequential matters. So you're basically becoming bittul to that klipa. It's using the term bittul here. Just like, oh my goodness. So did Steinschultz talk about the klipat noga there?
Absolutely, yes.
This is about the klipat noga. I'm going to have to dwell on this more.
Yeah.
I'm not going to waste your guys' time on it. This is something I'm going to have to think of. Oh.
Yeah, because he goes on to say, as in the case of idle chatter, which is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that would be
The
klipat
author-
noga that Dixie
Yeah.
talked about. She quoted
Yeah.
Steinschultz. Okay.
Yeah, the idle chatter, the author is speaking of secular studies that do not in themselves contain any forbidden element, but are halakhically neutral, involving no transgression, but also no holy purpose. So as long as they do not do not used for a godly end, they belong to Klippa Noga.
Excellent. Excellent. I got to think more about that. I appreciate you guys pointing
I'll
out.
I'll take a screenshot of this and shoot it to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I think about quite a bit. Moreover, the impurity of the intellectual disciplines of the nations is greater than the impurity of idle speech. I think that's what Steinschultz said as well. He was talking about that. It's greater. So the impurity. Oh, go ahead, Dixie.
Just carrying on from what Russ has said, what you're talking about now. As in the case of idle chatter, the author of the Tanya is speaking of secular disciplines that do not and of themselves contain any prohibited element, but are neutral, involving no transgression, but also no holy purpose. As long as they are not used for the sake of the divine, they belong to Klipa Noga. For something to belong to Klipa Noga, it need not be evil. It suffices that it contains no intrinsic holiness. Whenever a person involves himself in something that lacks holiness, even if it's intellectually lofty and profound, he contaminates his soul. More than that, the more lofty and profound the subject of study is, the more interesting and stimulating to the mind, the more a person invests his soul in it, and the more he contaminates the soul, involving not only his emotive attributes, but his intellectual facilities as well.
Very interesting. Oh my goodness. So this is an issue that I had, and I'm talking about just me personally. I have a computer science degree. I'm mean, I'm even wearing like a 2600 like hacker shirt. I was really involved since I was a kid, just programming and hacking around on computers. And even though I didn't do anything like bad where it comes to like all this like illegal hacking or whatever, but to be a programmer, to be a really, really good programmer, you have to be deeply involved in it. You have to be studying books, you have to be programming a lot. When I look back, and this is one of the reasons why I got out of it, I guess, it took too much. It didn't seem right. Like it just was taking way too much, not just time, but like my mental involvement. And I would go to computer programming shows and things, or groups and forums, which is fine. I think you should do that like professionally if you want, but it just took so much time. And then the programmers that were in these, I would go to these conferences. It's like all they did. It was their sole purpose was to be a better programmer or whatever. And it's hard to compete with that if you're trying to do other things in your life. And so I really, and I think Steinschultz is a very smart, like scientific type guy. And he probably was involved in some kind of science and maybe saw that as well. So I really attach with this. And I don't know what to do about it because in the free market, we live in a free market society where there's always going to be somebody better than you on something. It's hard to compete with that. And like you're going to have to take a hit financially because there is going to be people that are so devoted to their job, like that's all they do. They're just like workaholics or whatever, and they don't do anything else. And like that their business or whatever they work for will burn them out. They will use them, and then they'll get somebody else to do it. And that's something I think about, and I don't know how to beat that. I don't know how to beat that kind of system.
Yeah, you're just a tool, and when they're done with you, they put you on the shelf.
Yeah. So
that's the way.
yeah.
You know, that's the way. You know, I was done in construction. You're familiar with,
Yeah.
but you know, but in all fairness, you know, if I'm going to be a tool, I'm just going to hire out to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And that's the way I work.
The lowest bidder. What now?
I would, if I was going to be treated like a tool.
Yeah.
I
was
going to hire to the highest bidder.
Yeah. Yes. I see. Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Very good. It's rough. Already.
I don't know. Can I just throw something out?
Yeah.
Just throw out the idea that the Alter Rebbe is, you know, is teaching and writing at a particular time in history, where putting what we call a fence around Torah may have been, I don't want to say more important than it is today, because it's certainly not, but that this wisdom, this teaching here is pertains to a specific time in history. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You know, as opposed to something being for all ages, all times, all people. I've heard recently rabbis from the Chabad tradition, from the Hasidic tradition, say things like, you know, if you're involved in making the world a better place to live, which is sort of, you know, contributing to the coming of the Mashiach, that's the work you have to do. And it may not, it may sound like some of this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when they left, when they were in Paris, he studied, and he was the son of a Kabbalist and a Talmudic scholar, but he studied engineering in a regular university in Paris, which would seem like what's being described in this paragraph. And you know, when he went on to create what is now an international movement called Chabad, I'm not so sure his engineering background or his engineering studies had a lot to do with that. Does anything I'm saying make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm just wondering, like on a practical level, how you push through it. Like, is it the kavana? Like you try and keep in mind that all this is for
Lishma for the sake of heaven.
Maybe, James, the passion for all the so-called quote unquote worldly duties, the passion that we put forth and the efforts that we put forth in that is training ground for us to put forth that same passion and effort in Torah and mitzvah.
Yeah.
Right? And tzedakah. And so maybe it's training ground. Maybe we have to look at it that way. We not to be so judgmental on ourselves, but to look at it from that perspective. Hashem allowed us, you know, as ger to, or raises ger, whatever, to understand those basic principles to bring us into a more, it's kind of our boot camp to bring us into more awareness of where we need to be, where he wants us or desires us to be
Mhm.
with the whole aspect of Torah.
Interesting.
James, who is he who's the audience here that we're talking to in this? Is the Alter Rebbe is talking to Jews at this point?
Right. He's talking to Yisrael, and he's talking to Yisrael at a time where I forget what it's called. Is it called the Haskalah movement? But like the Enlightenment of European Jewry, particularly out of like Germany, are starting to assimilate into that
Yeah, I mean,
Umotal culture or whatever, right, Norman?
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Did you say enlightenment? Isn't that the month we're in right now? Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. This is a different. I put enlightenment in quotes because I think it's more of like a.
Do you remember the year this is being wrote in, James? The
Good
time frame?
question. I think it's right before the founding of the United States. Is it 1760s? I
So it's
forget.
after 1740, which is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution
Yeah,
and the explosion of science and population.
yeah,
But also, yeah, the science, and this was such at the forefront. You know, these guys, scientists back in that era, they were like rock stars.
yeah.
You know, and they had big drawings and big followings. And
I think the Tanya was first published in 1796.
Oh, there you go, 1796. Thank you.
1796, yeah.
Not that it was written within the past year of that.
Right, yeah, I think it took him like 20 or 30 years. I think he was teaching it for 10, then he started taking notes for 20 or something.
Yeah.
I forget.
It's funny, yeah, that's right. This came out right as the Golden Vilna passed.
Oh, wow.
1797, I believe, is when the Golden Vilna passed. So it's interesting that he never probably engaged in it or looked at it. But he talked a lot about science as well, and the seven sciences, and he was a master of all seven sciences. So I'm just looking at this in comparison to Hasidus and then the yeshivish type of studies.
Well, I know that they were contemporaries. Well, I think the Vilna Gaon, like you said, I think he was older. And I think the Alter Rebbe went to go visit him once, but they actually never met. Okay, occupying oneself with the intellectual disciplines of the peoples of the world is likewise included in the category of engaging in inconsequential matters insofar as the sin of neglecting the Torah is concerned. For in studying the intellectual disciplines of the nations of the Amim, too, one is guilty of neglecting Torah study as explained in the laws of Torah study. Hilchot Talmud Torah. So there's different types of studying. There's Lamud, and there's Oisek, which is a deep involvement of Torah study. So this is important because there's some people who will say, oh, you can study Torah. You can study any part of Torah, but a lot of times they're referring to Lamud Torah in that aspect. Oisek Torah, it becomes more precise, and therefore there's more argumentation about that in regards to non-Jews. Certain types of non-Jews. Moreover, the impurity of the intellectual disciplines of the nations of the Ha'amot is greater than the impurity of idle speech. Oh, this is what you were bringing up with Steinschultz, Russell. For the latter, clothe and defile only the emotions which emanate from the holy element of ruach, air within it. It's almost like the Sitra Achra of the Tanya. So, wow, this is a big deal. So the Alter Rebbe is basically saying the Jewish Enlightenment movement is like the opposite of what he's doing, what he's teaching, which seems pretty accurate. For the latter, clothe and defile only the emotions from the holy element of ruach, air, within his divine soul, because it's probably talking about speech, by tainting them with the impurity of klipat noga, contained in idle speech, which is derived. Oh, interesting. So you're actually putting klipa on it by tainting them. So you're adding some impurity. So, wow, this is okay. In the Hebrew, oh my goodness, we're actually talking about the nefesh elokis here. For the latter, clothe and defile only emotions which emanate from the holy element of ruach. So you're putting, so because you have that nefesh elokis coming, that is down in the seichel, when you start to interact with that idle chatter, you're clothing it in defiled garments. You're clothing that in defiled garments, and it's called klipa here. Interesting. So I've always thought of klipa, particularly klipat noga, as a thing, like a neutral thing, not something that had klipa put over it. You know, something that's just to be removed. And maybe that's just because I have, I have like so much klipa, I guess. I've always seen it as something I got to remove. Never something that's been like put on. You know what I mean? It's like you're you're at your, what's the phrase, you can, it's only up from here. You're only up from here, James. By tainting them with the impurity of klipat noga contained in idle speech, which is derived from the evil element of ruach, air, which is one of the components of this klipa in his animal soul, as mentioned above. Evil, does it really say evil? The ruach hara. Oh, I don't think it's talking about ruach being evil, but maybe the evil element of ruach. In other words, in ruach there might be an evil element to it. Is that what it's read? Is that how?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Is that how you read that? Okay.
Yeah, it's like you said, you have the ability to blessing or cursing. What
Right.
from the ruach, from the air, from
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect way to put it. Thank you, Russell. Thanks for because I didn't want to get confused there. Thank you for pointing that out. As mentioned above, the godly soul and the animal soul are both composed of 4 spiritual elements. And Mercy, I think you had this question about the different elements and things. So the animal soul, the nefesh behemoths, are composed of 4 spiritual elements: fire, air, water, and earth. The emotions such as love and fear, which one express in idle talk, emanate from the element of air. Thus, idle speech defiles the emotional attributes of the divine soul, which emanate from the holy element of air. By using them in the service of the animal soul's element of air, i.e., its emotional attributes, which are impure since they derive from klipat noga.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So this is a good, because I remember Mercy, like it was a month or two ago, you were talking, and I have this question too, I guess, but I more specifically remember you asking the question, like, what are the elements and what do they do in this whole aspect of klipa and klipa
Exactly.
yoga? Like, because from a scientific mind, to hear about the elements as having some kind of spirituality, or like air, earth, and like everything's based off of those things, that seems like old school, like what the Greeks would think about or whatever. But this is talking about it's something deeper. It's talking about how air, like our physical air, is just an expression of this more spiritual type of air, which is the actual fundamental element, is the way I'm gathering this. And that all derives from that's what the klipa is derived from. In other words, the klipa is formed out of these 4 elements. And that's what's talked about in oh my goodness, is that the book of Daniel or the book of Ezekiel? Okay. That's very interesting. This is a very deep, thoughtful section of the chapter here. Idle speech does not, however, defile the levels of Chabad. Oh, wow. Russell, we've talked about this before, and I think Mike's talked about this, how like the seichel of Esav, why does the seichel of Esav never go corrupt?
Right. Exactly. The Chabad never, never shattered.
Oh, wow. Idle speech does not, however, defile the levels of Chabad, the intellectual faculties in his soul, for it is but words of foolishness and ignorance, since even fools and ignoramuses can speak that way. Since these are not intellectual matters, the intellect remains uninvolved and untainted. Oh,
Wow.
that's awesome.
That's really good too. And
Yeah.
thank you, Russell, for saying that. I mean, that's just the highest elements that just are not going to shatter, period.
Yeah.
They're not going to come down into the 7. Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome? Oh, and the 7 are never going to go up into the impurity of the 7's never going to go up in the seichel. Like they literally can't go there. That is awesome. That is really amazing. Not so in the case of the science of the nations. Thereby one clothes and defiles his divine soul faculties of Chabad intellect with the impurity of the Klipat Noga contained in those sciences. Oh, so we might have a little difference here. So what's going on is that the intelligence aspect, the seichel of the Umot
With the impurity of
whither the sciences have fallen through the shattering. Wow, Russell, this is what it's talking about. Look, the shattering of the vessels.
Absolutely, yeah.
So either listen, either we're going to get into something here that is deeper, and we're getting a better understanding of it, or it could be something that there's a bit of a machlokas here. We'll see. Not so. I'm going to read this again. I'm sorry, guys, this is getting long in the tooth, but this is not so in the case of the science of the nations, the Umot Alam. Thereby one clothes and defiles his divine soul. So the Nefesh Elokis. And again, I'm going to say this is geared towards the Yisrael who's involving themselves in the Torah. This does not probably occur with somebody who has not involved themselves with Torah, right? It can't be any impurity there. There's no real, I hate to say it, but there's no real like intelligence.
Let me explain to you like this, James. I think it may help, and I'm pull this out. But I was told that that the Kabbalah is a science from above, okay, and then the science from the nation is a science from below. Okay, yeah. The science from above was given to the Jewish people the science from below was given to the nation. So this is exactly what it's talking about. And then this science from the nation has a impurity about it, where the science from above, the Kabbalah, does not have that impurity.
That makes sense. So maybe this is why I have the issue, the machlokus in myself when I was programming and doing all that, and I was like, I just don't want to deal with it that much. You know what I mean? Maybe, I don't know. But in other words, I was like wrestling with it or whatever. His divine soul's faculty of Chabad with the impurity of the Klipot Noga contained in those sciences, whither they, the sciences, have fallen through the shattering of the vessels out of the hinder part, the Acharaim of Chokhmah, of holiness, as is known to the students of Kabbalah. Well, I guess you're a student of Kabbalah, Russell.
But you know, that's kind of the thing what you're wrestling with is once you start studying Torah, you start studying these higher things, you start involving your mind and your intellect with it. You know, the mundane things like your work it's a hindrance to you, because you'd rather have your intellect involved with Torah in this, but you have to work to pay the bills and to do things. So that's what you're wrestling with. I wrestled with the same thing for many years.
Okay, good. And Norman, is that kind of what you're referring to? Like when you work on the sciences, when you're doing these things, you want to have the kavana, like, okay, things need to get done here. I'm going to use the sciences, but it's for the sake of heaven or some such.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the key is moving to Lishma for the sake of heaven. As Russell said, you got to pay the bills, but if at least if you don't have any money, you can't give tzedakah. If you don't have any money, you can't
buy books, things like that.
You can't buy books. If you don't have any money, you can't, there's a lot of things you can't support your family.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. That's a big one when you become a parent. You start living not for yourself, and
the holiness comes from the rabbis who are supported to where all they do is study, and they have the time and the ability and the intellect to just engross and involve themselves with study, and their needs are met. That's why it's important to support the rabbis. Any opportunity that you get is supporting a rabbi. Is you're just bringing Torah into the world.
Yeah, I think that's why I believe it's the Rambam who talks about the levels of charity, levels of tzedakah, and what the highest ones are. Supporting Torah study and helping someone to get into business. Those are pretty high up there.
Excellent. Thank you both. Dixie, did you got your hand up?
Yeah, I do. This is kind of what you're talking about, like, questioning with your work and stuff. The wisdom of the nations render impure the divine soul's conjugative facilities, unless one uses them as an axe with which to chop wood, meaning in order to earn a comfortable living in which to serve Hashem.
Thank you. Excellently put. Unless one employs them, these sciences a useful instrument, these as a means of earning a more affluent livelihood with which to be able to serve Hashem. Very good. Or unless he knows how to apply them, the sciences in the service of God, or to his better understanding of his Torah. An example, he utilizes mathematics to better understand the laws of the sanctification of the new moon. Again, what everybody was saying. This is the reason why the Rambam and the Ramban of blessed memory and their peers engaged in them, in the sciences, since they were able to utilize this knowledge in the service of God and Torah.
Makes sense.
Regarding that which was stated at the beginning of this chapter, that a thing prohibited even by rabbinic enactment remains attached to the three unclean klipot and cannot be elevated to holiness, even when it is used unwittingly and for the sake of heaven. i.e., in order to have strength to study and pray. The following story is worth reading. A Hussid once came to the Alter Rebbe, lamenting the fact that his son-in-law was subject to periods when he would doubt his faith. The Alter Rebbe responded that the son-in-law had unwittingly consumed milk, which was milked by a non-Jew. I'm going to interject and probably say this says goy or akum, which usually means idolater. But nonetheless, today it's probably still considered the same getter. But anyways, with no Jew in attendance. Though he was unaware of this fact, and though the prohibition against such milk is only of rabbinic origin, this had so strong an effect upon him that it caused him to doubt his faith. The Alter Rebbe then proceeded to tell the Hussid how the matter could be rectified, thereby healing the son-in-law of his spiritual malady. Very interesting. Yeah, this is a this is an interesting law because there's a lot of non-Jews that work on farms and they're milking, and there's yeah. What happens? Yeah, 'cause we're in this time where there are non-Jews that are coming out of Avodah Zarah, right? And we're in this twilight, and we have to do, as non-Jews, we have to do our utmost to abstain from things like idolatry. And when we do those things, when we are involving at least in the seven, we are releasing Yisrael, like true Yisrael, from a coercion of the Umot HaOlam. And there are two ways to do our parts. There's things that Yisrael does and that needs to do, and things that non-Jews and only us can do. We can only release that. Yisrael is kind of powerless. Well, no, that's not true. It's not true. We live in such a time where Yisrael can't engage us in the Torah. And we live in such a time where we can study Torah. We can oisek in Torah now. We're not going to be burned at the stake, heaven forbid, or expulsion from our families or whatever for the things that we're studying. Well, that was chapter 8, and we went over time, so I thank you all for staying with us. That's pretty amazing. I appreciate everybody's input, and everybody gave input tonight, so I really do appreciate that. Very engaging. I deeply appreciate you guys all for studying this with everybody else too. It's very important work what we're doing. Again, back to this, like, we're going to get to a time where we're going to have more and more interaction and better things going on in the world, better and better. So may we increase.
And
Amen. So thank you all very much. Let you guys get to bed now or whatever you do.
Thank you, James.
But thank you all for coming. I
James.
really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you, James.
Take care. See you next week, God willing.